you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Today we're going to be discussing PTSD and corrections, and we have one of our favorite guests here, William Young, author of When Home Becomes a Housing Unit. William Young, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, of course. Good morning, fellow Tier Talkians. I am William Young, a veteran correctional officer and author and fellow advocate like our friend Anthony Gangi here. Like he mentioned, my book is called When Home Becomes a Housing Unit, and it's a book about the side effects, the negative personality changes that can follow us home in this profession and how it affects how we interact in normal life with normal people.
Now, William, you also have a show that you release every Saturday on Facebook Live. What motivated you to do this show, and what's the show about?
Well, to be honest with you, man, some of the stuff that you do kind of motivates me a little bit, and I wanted to take the focus that I have, which is on the mental health and wellness of correctional officers, and I wanted to try to bring on people that were well versed in that field and provide just another platform for people to come on and to listen, right? So we can reach as many people as possible. And again, the focus is your mental health, your wellness, and how you survive emotionally through this career corrections.
Now, by the way, it's definitely a needed show. I love the fact that we're able to start something and people to continue on the message, because again, it's really about our voice, not just one voice. So it's great to see different perspectives and what each perspective has to offer. So now when we come back from our sponsor, we're going to be diving in deep with PTSD in corrections. I think it's a topic that people forget about, particularly because it's in corrections. I think a lot of stuff's forgotten when it comes to corrections. Right. So I think it's a great topic for us, but also for people from the public, from people from the outside to see what it is that we deal with. And basically, unfortunately, the end result if we don't deal with it properly. So now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talk for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell is going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. When we come back, we'll discuss PTSD in corrections with our boy, William Young. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description.
All right, and we're back. Hey, Will, let's start with a general definition of what PTSD is and how that pertains to corrections.
Well, I think a lot of people have PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. There's also post-traumatic stress injury. There's different things. I think we're familiar with the large-scale events that can cause PTSD or that can trigger that. Being a combat veteran, right? Some large public event like the Las Vegas shooting or the Boston Marathon bombing, or even on a smaller scale, if you're, working in corrections and you get, seriously assaulted, you get your jaw broke, you get stabbed, you get held hostage. I mean, I think we all understand and recognize that those events can cause some negative side effects, some problems for us down the road. But I think in corrections, what we're not prepared for, what we don't really acknowledge, is the fact that it doesn't have to be something large scale like that, right? Trauma is really funny. And trauma affects everybody differently. So in corrections, we're subjected to kind of these micro events over the course of a 5, 10, 15-year career, right? These little everyday incidents that some of them go unreported, right? So, an inmate gets in your face and threatens to kill your family while you're at work. I mean, that has long-term effects on us, whether we want to believe it or not, because a little part of us changes every time we hear something like that. A standoff with an inmate where he's got his fist balled up and he's squared up on you and he wants to fight, and then nothing happens. I mean, our body has a physical reaction to that. And over the course of the time, our career, all the things that we see and that we say and that we hear and have to do, they change us, man. And it all adds up into this one gigantic, this weight that just breaks us.
Now, what you're saying really hits home, because you're talking about specific incidences that we go through in this career that, because we work in corrections, prisons, jails, detention centers, it's very hard for us to escape from, because the environment is something we're exposed to every day. So, for example, if there was a riot and, place gets torn up, officers get hurt, staff members get hurt, the next day, people have to go right back into that area where that riot took place. So how does not being able to escape affect the mental well-being of our correctional staff? I mean, the moment they come in, that door shuts, they cannot escape. I mean, it's got to have an effect.
Well, absolutely it does. If you look at our suicide ratio, our risk of suicide, it's higher than a combat veteran. And a lot of that has to do with us not having the appropriate time to deal with or decompress from the situations that we have, right? We go in and out of our war zone every single day. Take even like a deep sea diver, right? If you go way down in the depths of the ocean with all that pressure and all that stuff on your body, they have to bring you up really, really slowly, or you get really sick and it could be fatal, right? But our problem is we don't have that time. We are thrust into that environment every single day and then pulled out. And what I want to say is, nothing even has to happen, Anthony. It's just that door shutting behind you. It's just the smell of the place when you walk in. It's the threat of that riot or that assault happening every single minute of every single day that really, over time, tears us down, weighs on us. I tell the story. Sorry about that. I tell this thing. Here's the difference. If I was to threaten you today and say, you know what, Anthony, I'm gonna punch you in the mouth. I'm gonna break your jaw. I'm not gonna tell you when. I'm not gonna do it today, but one of these days, I'm gonna break your jaw. And then every day we interact, I say something else. Maybe I get a little closer to you. Maybe I'll get a little more descriptive. But every day you come to work and you're wondering if today is the day that, is he really gonna do it today? I don't know. Now, whether that's at the forefront of your brain or not, it's doing something up here. And then if it never happens, I mean, your body is still reacting to that. And that's kind of what we deal with in corrections, that perception of, what if this happens to me for forever?
Right. And the concern is not being able to release it. A lot of people get so concerned because they feel if they have these issues, they go to their department. The department may be aggressive in how they react to the vulnerability of an officer. So a lot of us tend to bottle it up and not let the department know that we have concerns, where I believe what we need to do is we need to develop management who is trusted enough to know that, hey, if I have a problem, I can go to them. And I think it could be seen definitely by their actions. I believe that those teams, like those CISM teams, the teams that come in after there's a major issue, really help debrief staff, one thing, but also helps to make sure that staff's able to do the job. The last thing you want, and guys, if you're in management, listen to this. This is very important here, is the last thing you want is to have staff stressed out, because if staff is stressed out, they're going to reflect it onto the population. So if you open it up without really understanding how your staff was able to go through that. So if you had a riot and the next day you think it's perfectly okay just to open up that area again, you're not taking into account the people that probably are affected but aren't saying anything. You really need to slowly introduce them back into that environment and have some way for them to say, I'm okay, I'm ready, and just that trusted dialogue. I don't think we see that much, do we, Will?
No, we don't. And I think that everybody thinks that there's, you know, the employee assistance program, EAP, or whatever you have at your facility. And that has a very bad reputation, right? People think, oh, it gets right back to management. But you have so many different options when it comes to dealing with your mental health, dealing with these things. If you don't think you're ready to talk to a counselor, you can talk to a coworker. There's got to be somebody in your facility that you trust. If there's not, then I don't know. I mean, you're talking about people that you trust with your life, trust to come save you, and you can't tell them if that person hanging in the cell bothers you. I mean, so you need to start there, and then if you feel like you need to go further, then you seek outside help. I had a LMHP on the show on Saturday, and she talked about being able to interview your therapist. So, and some people don't know that you can call different therapists and you can do like a little 15-minute, 20-minute interview with them to see if they're a right fit, to see if their behavior model is a good fit for you, or if you feel comfortable with them. And so the main thing that management can do, I think, is provide, you know, the options, the resources, and just a little bit of information to say, hey, you know, if you feel like you need help, if you feel like something happened to you, here's X, Y, and Z that you could do. Not just, hey, after you just witnessed your friend getting, you know, assaulted, go downstairs before you leave for 5 minutes and talk to EAP, and then go home and write your report later. I mean, it's got to be more personal, more in depth than that, because people, and again, the gal that I talked to, she was assaulted in her prison, and she said it took over a year and a half for her to say, you know what, I need some help with this. And so by then, everybody's kind of walked away from you. Everybody's kind of forgot about. There's been several other things that have happened since. And so you're right. We internalize that. And I had you talked about, you know, why is it important to management? And I think that I have a buddy that's a mechanic, and he brought this up. He said, hey, Bill, pitch it like this. Do you want to wait till the motor blows and pay to replace the motor? Or do you just want to do the oil changes when you need to do the oil changes? And just a little bit of information, just some knowledge on coping techniques and why this mental health thing is important can save a staff member, man. It can help the morale of your staff. It can keep those people for long and healthy careers.
Right. You know, I also want to say, as management, you sometimes have to be proactive, which means that you may not wait for someone to request it. You just may know that these are certain times where it's needed. The death of an officer, a riot, maybe even a staff assault. You know, these are going to be times where it's like, you know what, even though it's not requested, let's go ahead and have the team out there. Let's go ahead and have that interaction. Also, if you're a staff member who feels that you're going through something and you fail to say something to someone, you don't know how that's going to affect you and your ability to do the job. So you may be putting others at risk. So the other motivation is, even if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for the partner who could be working next to you, who will depend on you, and all of a sudden you froze. I mean, Will, you got to agree. I mean, some of it's also on the person having to bring it up themselves.
Well, absolutely. You can have all the help in the world, but if you're not going to take it, then if you're not going to be receptive, then it doesn't matter. But you're right. Look, if we got into a fight at work and I hurt my shoulder, I felt, you know, we're getting older, right, Anthony? So when we hit the ground, it hurts a little bit, right? But so what do? Well, we write that report, we write the incident, injury, whatever forms you got to write, just in case. You're like, you know what, I think I'm okay, but just in case something happens down the road, I wake up tomorrow, I wake up 3 months from now, I can't throw a baseball anymore. You had that documented, right? So why don't we do the same thing for our mental health? Like you just said, you know, I think that this might have bothered me, or, hey, it was a little messed up. So why don't I go ahead and look at this a little bit? And if it's not that big a deal right now, then that's fine. But have that information available. So in 4 months from now, when you're screaming at your kid because something he did kind of triggered a memory of that moment, then you can get some help for it.
Right. And some people may say, well, Gange, it's slow and subtle. You may not realize it's happening. You know, me and Will just discussed this for 2 other venues that we provide. If you know yourself before you enter this profession, you know who you are and how you deal with situations, then you should know if your response is abnormal to you. You know, so like my wife knows that I wear the uniform doesn't wear me at the time when I was custody. So if I would share stories with her, and yes, I do share stories with them because I feel that I need to have a way to debrief. I need to have a way to kind of unload. I may not be as graphic with those stories, but I do let them know, like, this is what's happening and this is some of the stress I'm dealing with. So my wife at that time, knowing who I am, was always able to help me through whatever concerns I had, you know, concerns that were stressful. Now, had I bottled myself up and not tell her, then eventually I start to change. And now the person she goes to help, she doesn't know how to anymore because that person no longer exists. That person has changed. So right now, you should know who you are. You should have a foundation. And anytime you even deviate an inch away from that foundation, then you know there's something there. There's something bothering you, whether you laugh at something you normally wouldn't laugh at, or you're getting angry at something you normally wouldn't get angry at. These are concerns that you need to take a step back, look into yourself and say, what's happening to me? I don't usually lash out on my daughter like that, or I don't usually laugh at someone's death. What's happening? Will, you got to, right off the bat, Will, because we mentioned the other show, and I was hoping that you could maybe just kind of describe it again, the importance of knowing yourself when entering this profession and trying to stay true to who you are, even when you're in uniform.
No, you're right, Anthony. If nobody knows what they're getting into when they start corrections. I mean, we can say that we kind of have a little understanding, but we don't until you're inside, until that door shuts behind you. You have no idea what it's gonna do. So you have to know kind of yourself. You have to know your moral compass. You have to know. If you're not a badass on the street, then you don't go inside of a prison and put on the uniform and be a badass. It's just not. It's not going to work for you. So you have to know, because you're right. These subtle little changes, we don't recognize. It's like losing weight. You lose a few pounds, and somebody who hasn't seen you for a while, they're like, "Oh, Bill, you look good." And I'm like, "Well, I've only lost a couple pounds," but I don't see it in myself. They see it before me, right? And so we have to understand that. But here's the problem, Anthony, because they're so subtle, and because the changes that are made in our life are survival techniques inside, right? The cynicism, the laughing at the dark humor, the inappropriate comments, all of that shit is how we survive a shift, right? But it's not how we survive a dinner party, right? And so we have to understand that and look at that when we start screaming at our kids, when we start arguing with our wife over stupid shit, when we get into confrontations with people, and I don't, maybe I'm the only one that does it, but I can get into an argument with somebody and I get that little adrenaline dump like I do at work. And because I'm so good at what I do, I can get somebody spun up and bring them back down. And then they're apologizing to me because I was an asshole. Those are all changes that happen because of the environment that I work in. Now, somebody's going to say, no, it's not, Will. You were that way before. And you know what? A little bit, that's right. But corrections doesn't make you better. It amplifies any character deflaw, any insecurity that you have. That environment will expose that, right? And so you have to understand that it's a co-contributing factor, right? So yeah, this guy is an alcoholic, right? This guy's wife is leaving him, right? Okay, yeah, good. Those are things that will affect the way we behave. But then also this guy then goes to work and works in one of the most negative environments on the planet. And that doesn't help him. It's not like he can go to work and people are super warm and supportive and he feels safe and he can confide in people. No, he's got like this perfect storm. And that's what breaks us down. I mean, I'm not saying corrections is the one thing that's going to take a person down. But if you work in corrections, then you're more at risk for all of these. It's like having everybody's talking about immune systems right now. It's like working in corrections, is a pre-existing condition for all these other things. And that's what I believe.
No, obviously I agree with you. I also believe that when you go through something, you have to identify it immediately and not let it pile up, because that's what causes you to lash out on normal things that you wouldn't lash out on. And if you look at yourself to figure out what's causing it, you're going to be wrong, because what's causing it is something from 3 weeks ago, something from a month ago. And this happened to be that you filled yourself up to the point where you explode, and it's just the energy wasn't placed where it needed to be at the time that it needed to be placed. Like if you go through something major, that's the time where you have to sit back, debrief yourself, get the resources that you need, as opposed to saying, just another day on the job and pushing it down. Because eventually we all have a limit. And when it explodes, it's going to explode sometimes where you feel the most comfortable to sort of be yourself, which are going to be the people that you love, which are going to be the people that want to be there, the people that want to help you. And now what you did is, now you just pushed them away. Now you lost your most needed resource.
Right.
So please, when you go through an issue at that moment, take the courage to stop, see where it has affected you, and then try to deal with it at that moment. Do not let it sit and fester. And Will, you're familiar with this story, obviously, because you've been through this. So you're talking through experience. You're talking about trial and error. Do you think when you delayed in handling the issue, do you think that really affected your personal life?
Well, absolutely. The thing is that you don't even know you have an issue, right? So you just talked about it. A great example for me is when I'm on a Sunday afternoon, I'm walking through the department store shopping with my family, right? And it's a beautiful day, and it's one of my, it's on my weekend, and I don't have a care in the world. But they come over the intercom and they ask for all responders to report to the front of the store. Now, at my work, when somebody calls for all responders over the intercom, that's not a good thing. They're not coming to give you free cookies or something. I mean, that means something's happening. Somebody needs help right now, right? Well, at this department store, they consider their cashiers, they call their cashiers up front responders. So I'm walking down the store and I'm enjoying life and everything is good. And somebody says, hey, we need all responders to report to the front. And my whole body changed. I felt my stomach tighten up. I felt an adrenaline dump. And I was for a split second, and time acts funny in these moments sometimes. But I was like, what do we got to do? What's going on? And then I realized, hey, dummy, you're at a store. You're shopping for underwear. Nothing's going on. But it took me a long time to calm down, to settle down. And there's a lot of things that kind of trigger those moments for me. And God forbid my kid need help with his homework, or, my daughter wants me to look at, the 15th thing on Amazon she needs me to order this week. I snap in those moments. It doesn't have to be, like you said, it takes 3, 4, 5 weeks, 6 months, a year and a half for these things to actually surface. I mean, just real quick, before I started working in corrections, I worked at a mortuary transport company. So my job was to pick up dead bodies and to deliver them to funeral homes or the morgue, or we would sometimes embalm them, whatever. And I talked to hundreds of people that have lost a family member, their brother, their dad, whatever, screaming, crying, saying, I just talked to my husband. I just got off the phone with him. And then I just pulled her husband out of his Lexus after he shot himself, out in the middle of a cornfield. And so one of the long-term effects of that is that if I call my wife and she doesn't answer her phone, I think she's dead. I don't say, oh, her phone's probably in her car. She forgot it again. She's just not going to answer it. I start to panic, and I call that phone, and I call that phone, and I call that phone. And until she calls me back, I can't calm down. Now, I understand that that's because of all of those conversations. And I link all that conversation to the crying, to the things that I saw that burned images into my brain that I can't ever get out. Right. And so that's what I'm saying. A lot of people don't understand this right now. It doesn't make sense to them right now, especially brand new people. But it's important to have this information, because down the road, it can really affect the way that you do business outside of work. I mean, just the emotional numbing, the isolation, those kind of things don't help you live a long, happy, productive life. I mean, it it tears you up. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a big statistics guy. I mean, if you want somebody in a lab coat, there's people out there doing it. But what I can tell you is that because of the things that I've been through, because of the things that I've seen and that have been said to me, it's affected me. And it changed. And I've been with my wife for 20 years. So she knows the William Young before I worked in corrections. And she was one of the one that says, hey, you're no good with people no more. You are a different person than you were when I met you. And that was like getting kicked in the nuts, right? I mean, I knew something was going on, but now it's affected her. It's affected my kids, because they're walking on eggshells around me and everything. And it's all because I failed to recognize, or I wanted to recognize, admit that some of the stuff that I saw had bothered me, that had affected me.
Well, we live in two worlds, very unique than most other professions, and we have to try our best to make sure that the two worlds don't blend, but that's impossible. I mean, we're pretty good at, I like to think we should be at least better at bringing home into work, because we should be limited with our personal lives with, the population. But the other side is tougher. The other side is, that's where we're more vulnerable, and that's where we're able to express a side of ourselves that we wouldn't normally express at work. So that's kind of like our relief. When we go home, that's our chance to unload. And for those that just decide to say that, hey, you got to keep that separate, I don't think that's healthy. I think that what that does is that messes up with your chance to break away from the stresses of the job and kind of tell your family, this is what I've been through and how do I cope with what happened. And I think I'm kind of going to use this, see what this term means to you, but we get conditioned to the abnormal at our job if we don't give ourselves a chance to break away from it, have that escape, meaning that is your home life. And sometimes that doesn't mean that when I say escape, that when you go home, you forget about it. No, escaping is a process. It's not the outcome. So like if I'm home and I decide to say I can forget about work at home totally, even though I have stuff happening, nope, gonna forget about it, not bring it up to the family. That's not good, because I think the escape is a daily process every day where we're able to unload. So when we do escape, we are actually 100% away from whatever's bothering us as best we can, where if it's going through the process, and I decide I'm just going to ignore the process and just go home and just say, I'm good. Well, the problem is you're not giving your family 100% of the time because you're not good. You're constantly thinking about what happened at the job. It's stressful. So until you're able to unload that, you're not breaking away from anything. So I think, and I don't know if you would want to comment on this, Will, but escape is a process as opposed to just the outcome. Would you agree with that?
I do. I mean, okay, so just put it like this, put it in terms like this, because every correctional officer wants to kind of ignore what we're talking about. Let's just put it like this. Say you get into a very violent car accident, right? And there's glass and there's gas everywhere, right? So with what you're saying, with our famous leave work at work and home at home, 8 in the gate, whatever they want to say, with that in mind, once that person is cut from that car, is pulled away and goes home and leaves the scene of that accident, they should be fine, right? There should be no lasting injuries. There should be no problem, nothing. They're away from the scene, right? Just leave your trauma at the scene of that accident, right? And that's what we're saying. I think it's so dismissive, so dangerous for us to tell somebody who's struggling to just leave work at work and home at home, because it's not possible. And let me explain. I'm not talking about going to work and discussing, my daughter's soccer career with the inmates, right? That's not what I'm saying. But back in 2006, when my mom was dying of cancer and I would go in and out of the facility, I can't just, as soon as I put on my uniform, not think about my mom dying of cancer, right? I can't. That's always in the back of my head. Now, I didn't go to work and discuss it, but home is creeping into my work. I'm shorter tempered. I've got, I just don't want anything to do with anything that's going on because my head is somewhere else, right? Oh, maybe you shouldn't have came to work then. Well, whatever. But if you have something that crazy happen to you, you can't leave it. And it works the other way. Like you said, the only way you get through these nightmares is to talk about them. right? And to discuss them. Now, you don't come home and you don't tell all the details, because most of the time it falls on deaf ears, right? If you've never been in a correctional facility, you've never smelled that scent of too many people housed together in a small area, then you don't really know. You don't know how that affects a person. But it is vital to your survival to discuss those things, to talk about those things in whatever way you feel comfortable with, right? And it's not, listen, the job follows us home. That's all there is to it. I mean, even if it's you're a new guy and you put your first person in a restraint chair and you're super excited about it, you're going to go home and you're going to tell your buddies about it. Somebody's going to talk about this. I mean, everywhere I go, every time somebody finds out what I want to do, they want to know, oh, what's something cool that's happened at your work, or what's the scariest thing you've ever been through, and so it comes up. And so I found the best way to do it is just embrace it. Just talk about it. And every once in a while, I maybe tell a story that probably goes a little too far, but a lot of times I do that on purpose. But you getting those things off your chest and getting them out in the air, and maybe even getting a perspective for somebody who's not, like when you talk to your wife, maybe they can, from an outsider's perspective, say, well, is it really that big a deal? Or can you talk to me more about this? Or, hey, you're a little different today. I know you said you're fine, but you're not really fine. I mean, those are all things, very important things that you have to understand. But again, if nothing else comes out of this, everybody out there that's ever told anybody to leave work at work and home at home should immediately stop and think about what that actually means to a person who's going through some shit.
When I started Tier Talk, technically, not even just Tier Talk itself, but just the writing came because, yes, I wanted people to be aware of what we go through. I think there was a lot of knowledge out there that they just didn't have. They were misinformed. But I also felt I needed to vent it. So I kind of was putting it out there on LinkedIn, publishing the articles and waiting for somebody to say, wow, I didn't know that. And I think that kind of is part of my enjoyment here, even doing this. This is kind of like an escape for me where I'm able to, maybe take the concerns of today. However, I got to generalize those concerns because I'm still active on the job, and create a platform and then just build on the responses. But the cool thing is knowing that you're not alone, that there's going to be that comment that says, Gangi, this is a great time for this topic because I just went through it today. And the reason why I'm able to have so many videos about like so many different topics is because it relates to the real world, because there were things that happened that I'm like, oh man, and then I go right to vent. But again, however general, not where you could pinpoint and say this is happening at this place, but right. Just a way to vent it out and then to see what type of response you get. And sometimes it's also great to see that people are going through the same thing you're going through, and that through just stating the concern and getting it out there, whether there's an answer to it or not, means so much to so many people. And then you start finding a purpose. Like, I mean, think about what you went through, Will, the sacrifice that you had to make because you were dealing with this. And then, having a way to find out that, man, my story has been so helpful to others that it winds up making you think about the struggle you went through and finding the positive. You're finding the positive amongst the negative and being able to share your story and have people come back and say, Will, thank you. It wasn't so much about having the answer, Will. It wasn't so much of you coming out and saying, I went through this and this is what you have to do and these are the answers. It's more about saying, you're not the only one going through this. That we're going through, and we'll go through it together and we'll discover things along the way. But right. I think the key for me is I'm not always looking for a solution anymore. I'm just looking for people to understand what I'm going through, be there to support me, and we're good, because there are certain things in life that there is no solution for.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. I don't have an answer. I'm not sitting up here saying that, hey, if you do step 1, 2, 3, 4, then you're going to be just fine. Because I'm not fine. I still have to go to work tonight. I still have to go to work for another 8, 9 years, right? So everybody's familiar with Forrest Gump, right? That movie. There's that scene where he's in Vietnam and he runs back and forth into the forest, pulling bodies out, pulling his buddies out, kind of he knows the danger. Well, he probably doesn't know because he's Forrest Gump. He doesn't understand it, but But look, that's what I feel like I want to do, because you're right. No matter where you go on this planet Earth, being a correctional officer is the same. We have the same side effects everywhere. So you're not alone. So we don't have to say, oh, in this particular cell block on this particular day in this housing unit, that's good at work, because when you mention a name at work, I always like when you mention an inmate's name at work and all the officers are like, oh yeah, that guy. But it doesn't matter. We are all going through the exact same thing. And a lot of the depression, a lot of the anxiety, a lot of that negative feeling, that shamefulness comes from the fact that you feel like you're the only one that's going through this. I'm the only one that this job is affecting. But that's not the case, man. There's hundreds of thousands of correctional officers that in some way, shape, or form have been affected by this profession.
Yeah, it's true. And I think if we able to create a venue like this, we're able to share it. It does encourage people to find out that they're not the only one, and then when they see a community that even though they may not have gone through it, but they're telling people it's okay to be vulnerable, that also encourages people to step up. And I think that's kind of what we're doing here. We're telling people it's okay if you're not perfect. It's right. Okay if you're afraid once in a while. It's okay to admit that you just don't know what to do. I mean, some of the shows we did, even for the Tier Talk podcast, we do have a Tier Talk podcast. The one coming out next
which is
week,
fantastic, by the way. Everybody should listen to that. It's fantastic information.
I appreciate that. Same as the show you provide.
Well, thank you.
We're doing it. We're doing it, Will. I asked the topic that me and Russ covered in the last one. It will air May 22nd, so I believe this Friday, is about your first day on the job. And the reason why we thought that was important was because the first day on the job is maybe the only time you're going to get people to admit that they weren't perfect. Right. Trust, asking our profession a couple of years down the line, they believe they're perfect and everything. But when it comes to that first day on the job, we thought that this was a good question to ask, because the people that are going to answer are going to probably admit to some level of vulnerability because they just did not know what to do. So with that said, one story that the gentleman goes over is he's a rookie on his first day, standing mess, got about 50 or 60 inmates in there, maybe a few staff. And there's a fight between two inmates and he froze. And he never really felt comfortable admitting that story before, but then it was great to get him to admit it, because it wasn't that he froze from fear. Maybe it was froze because of the fact that he didn't know what to do, but it was identifying the reasons why he froze. And the second gentleman that comes on talks about how he worked at like Lowe's and stuff and was they didn't have an academy. A lot of these places don't have an academy right from the get-go. So when he got into the first day on the job, being yelled at by his management staff was something he just wasn't used to. And it's great because, again, these aren't the only two people that have ever gone through that. Right. So I think it's great to do shows like this, because ultimately it's telling people that you can admit vulnerability in a profession that tells you, or that you think tells you, you can't. That's where it's good for management to come up and try to encourage the fact that if there's something you have to say, you need to say it, and then to tell people how it benefits the agency altogether. Because again, if you have staff that's not willing to say what's needed, you're going to have a facility that's eventually going to be in crisis. And with tension the way it is now, if you open up the doors and this is just kind of like a metaphor here, but if you open up the cell doors before staff is mentally able to receive it, you're going to have a clash, but I mean, Will, vulnerability in this profession, such a taboo, huh?
Well, yeah, we're professional tough guys and tough gals, man. I mean, we can't appear to be weak, and that's part of that's another thing that wears on us too, is that we're performing all of the time. And I'm not saying we're pretending to be a different person, but when you walk through a yard, or when you walk through a housing unit of 50, 60, 70, 100, 200 inmates, you put your chest out, you're in charge, right? It's the illusion of control. You can't walk down like this, like you really feel. Like you're like, oh shit, man, this is, I'm surrounded by sharks, man. This is not good. But so you're right. Everybody's vulnerable. I don't care. There's been something in your career that has compromised you a little bit. I'm of the belief of that. And that's listen, that's why it's important for guys like you to talk about this. For when I see Russ Hamilton, I listen to his resume and just his stature, just his presence. When he says, yeah, there's some, I've been through some things. I think that's important, because then the younger guys that are trying to impress all of us old salty veterans, they're like, well, look at that guy there. That guy says that it's okay to talk about this shit, so I'm going to talk about it too. And slowly we can kind of change the culture. And like you said, if you're okay, if you're unaffected by anything that you've ever seen on the job, then that's awesome. Then you have kind of a greater obligation to your fellow staff to say, hey, these are the things that I've done to ensure that I've kept my sanity. And also, you need to be strong for them when they need to come and talk to somebody. Don't be dismissive. Don't tell we tell our war stories and rookies sit around and listen to it and they're like, man, these guys are like, they're fighting every day. Nothing's ever bothered them. When that's not the case. I mean, it's like telling fishing stories, right? You get a bunch of correctional officers together. We've never lost a fight. We've never been scared. Nothing's ever happened, right? So it's just, it's so important to understand that and to say, you know what? And here's the other thing, Anthony, I'm going to get on a little soapbox here for a second, but who gives a shit if somebody thinks you're weak or somebody cares if you're scared? I mean, you obviously want to know that staff can rely on you, right? And there's been incidences. I was worried when I first started, how do the fights go down? How do we break up inmates? I went 6 months without responding to my first fight because I was assigned in a housing unit. But then after a couple of times where I've had to get into it and restrain inmates and stuff, I'm like, okay, you will act. It's not perfect. I don't think I've ever put handcuffs on the right way ever, because it doesn't go down like that. But just to know that you can do it and that the cavalry is coming, then that kind of gets a little bit better each time. Right. But you just have to make sure that you're there for each other and everything will work out. Everything will work out.
Will, you touched on something before we go to close. Now I want to revisit real quick the need to be tough and share those stories as if, right, most of them are not true stories. I remember someone telling me a story about how he used to go down these dorms and just kind of rile the inmates up and just kind of wake them up. We would call them fire starters. And as he's going through this story amongst all of us, of course, after it's all done, me being on the management side, I asked him one question, and it's what opened up. Why? Like, right. Why did you have to do that? He goes, what do you mean? I was like, I'm just saying, all right, you're a tough guy. I'm not, but what was the need of going down the dorms and just, harassing the inmates? I mean, to me, that means that you feel you have to prove something. I'm not understanding what that's supposed to prove. And again, I'm looking at this from a management level, but also even when I was an officer, a sergeant, I just didn't feel the need to do that. So, I wasn't brought up in where it's communication. I learned that right from the get-go that survives in this profession. I know for a fact I can't beat up everyone, probably hardly anybody at this time. But the point is it really was a wake-up call for this person, for instead of someone just accepting the story, for someone to say, why was that all needed? So again, if you happen to be in the middle of a dialogue where you find this person that may be telling you these unrealistic stories that really are meant to kind of compensate, in my opinion, compensate who this person really is, because most likely the people that are telling you that story maybe feel the need to compensate for whatever weakness it is. Maybe we need to bring them back to reality and kind of correct them and say, hey, I just don't understand why that was all needed. Because if I was an officer and that was my unit and you went in and you started doing that, I would have a problem with that. I really would have a problem with you stirring up the population for the sake of just stirring them up. I just don't think that's something that's beneficial to us as a team. Hey, Will, you have anything you want to say in closing?
No, I'll just piggyback on what you said. I think that it's very important to have those conversations for those people that are doing that. And they may feel like they have to act that way. They may feel like they have to prove yourself, so that's kind of what people think is cool and what needs to happen. And I've had those conversations. I said, look, we always talk about the correctional objective in our work at our place. And you know, that kind of stuff does not meet the correctional objective, right? And so breaking down those barriers. But in closing, and I want to thank you for having me on, Anthony. I love coming on and talking to you. This is fantastic. Your followers are fantastic. I love the comments and seeing that. And just know that you're not the only one out there that's dealing with this stuff. And so you're not on an island. All you have to do is reach out, right? Reach out and talk to somebody. Get on one of these videos and leave a comment and message. Say, hey, have William give me a call. Have Anthony give me a call. And we'll do it. I mean, that's what we do. And we'll help point you in the right direction. I'll sit on the phone and commiserate with you for a while if that's what you want to do, if that's what you need. I'm all about planting that seed and letting you guys and girls know that you're not the only one going through this. And that with a little bit of knowledge, with some coping mechanisms that we put in place, we'll make it. We'll get through this. I mean, it's not impossible, and we'll get through it together.
Hey, Will, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, purchase your book, or also follow you on Facebook Live on your great weekend show, how would they go about doing that?
So the book's on Amazon. When Home Becomes a Housing in it. I gotta look. I keep a little copy here like this. Oh, can we see it? Yeah, there we go. It's on, so you can search it on Amazon. I'm on Facebook at William Young, author. You can just search it and it'll come up. And then on Saturday nights at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, I do a Facebook Live show, and we talk about what me and Anthony are talking about. And we just go into I have different people on. This week I have a gentleman that's been a veteran in corrections, COVID-19 survivor. And we're just going to discuss kind of what you're talking a little bit about, how some of the aggression issues that we take with us outside of that, and how we can battle that up. So that's every Saturday night. So what you can do is you guys can listen to the podcast on Friday, Anthony and Russ's podcast on Friday, bump over to my show on Saturday, and then spend the rest of the week discussing it with everybody. That would be perfect.
I can tell you something. There's just such great information being provided. And are you able to give out your email?
Yeah, sure. It's justcorrections@gmail.com.
Yeah, and by the way, always a pleasure having you, Will. Guys, the show was something I felt that was needed, especially going through what we're going through now. I feel that we're starting to become conditioned to the separation of our coworkers, unfortunately. And corrections is really all about making sure we maintain that bond, because that's really what motivates us to respond. It's not so much the money. It's really the fact that that's my brother,
right? That's
my sister, and I have to do what I can to protect them. And I know right now with the COVID thing, there's changes that are happening, and there's a lot of people that are afraid. And I'm sure we're dealing with these concerns not in the right way. We're hiding them. We're not coming to work telling people, hey, I have a problem today and I just can't deal. No, we're still coming to work as brave as can be and dealing with the shit as it comes. And this is just a reminder to say that you're not the only one dealing with it. So if you have a concern, find someone that you can trust or connect with us. The key is that even though it's said we don't have the solution, sometimes it's just about getting it off your chest and letting people know that you're human, right, and that you're vulnerable. In this profession, it's okay to be vulnerable. And I still have to say, and William would agree, I think it's courageous to admit you're vulnerable in this profession. When everything else around you tells you can't, right. I think the courage comes from saying you are. So, as always, guys, the show's Tear Down. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.